welcome to the Love and Compassion podcast, which is we believe that love and compassion have the power to heal our lives and our world. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing content. On today's podcast, we'll be talking about the power of mindfulness to help young children flourish and become their best selves. I'm speaking to Ali Smith, Atman Smith, and Andres Gonzalez. They have been teaching a social emotional curriculum for over 20 years in Baltimore and now across America. And they have helped over 200,000 children with their work. Their work with their Holistic Life Foundation has been featured on Making a Difference on the NBC Nightly News, CNN, and CBS, as well as the Oprah Magazine, the Washington Post, Upworthy, Mindful Magazine, Yoga Journal, Shambhala Sun, and many, many more places. Their book, Let Your Light Shine, How Mindfulness Can Empower Children and Rebuild Communities, has also been featured on Good Morning America. Please join me in welcoming them to the show. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I think that the work that you're doing is so impactful, especially for the future of education. And can you tell the audience a little bit about how you actually got started on this work?
I guess the start came from, and my brother and I got introduced to meditation as young kids from our dad. He was into transcendental meditation, so he would get us up in the morning and we would meditate before morning cartoons, and it was meditation, Woody Woodpecker, Scooby-Doo. Or actually Scooby-Doo, then Woody Woodpecker, then off to school.
Yeah.
And we grew up in a self-realization fellowship church based on Kriya Yoga. Our dad got into the practice from our godfather, one of those people that got into yoga in the 60s and never ever got out of it. As we got older, I guess around the time I was in fourth grade, I was in second grade, our parents got divorced, and we lost our meditation practice. But as we got older and, life happened, we were finishing up college. We were looking for something to do. We met Andy at the University of Maryland College Park. And the three of us were pondering how we were going to spend the rest of our lives. And I'd say two important things happened. One, our dad sat us down and told us not to go get jobs and to start a business. He was all about entrepreneurship and not, it's like three people of color getting caught up in the world of the corporate world where you hit that glass ceiling when you look a certain way and you can't advance beyond that. Then he also had a lot of friends that were getting fired and losing their pensions and getting downsized after decades of faithful work to certain companies that they were working for. So that happened. And then we got back into yoga, talking to our godfather. And he was always trying to get us back into it, but we kind of dove deeply into the practice. And the combination of that yoga practice from Uncle Will, our godfather, the entrepreneurship push of our dad, and then the three of our desire to help humanity and the planet. It seemed like there was a lot of suffering going on and a lot of pain and a lot of people taking advantage of other people in the environments. It was like that perfect storm, and then the stars aligned and the Holistic Life Foundation was born.
Oh, amazing. Sounds like your dad was a visionary, because when you look at the world of work right now, there's so much going on. I think that from a larger perspective, larger consciousness, we really are shifting how we do work. But I think what an amazing vision. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
When you were talking about entrepreneurship and our dad, all of his friends thought he was crazy for telling us not to go get jobs, because it was it's like, they were like, you paid for private school, your boys are in college, they both have degrees, you told them not to go get jobs. He was like, no, even, he was like, no, I see down the line, this is going to be what's going to serve them. And then probably 15 years into it, all of his friends were like, yeah, we probably should have told our kids not to go get jobs either. Because it was a struggle at first, and they were like, see, we told you they should go get jobs, because he was supporting us financially, our bills and the organization early on. But then once we figured it out and things started to grow, all of his friends wished they had done that with their kids as well.
And his friends not only went from doubters to supporters, but they actually started supporting us financially as well too. And now, whenever we have a fundraiser, they come and support and tell us how proud they are. So it was a huge shift, but it took a really long time. And honestly, our dad, he was a stubborn dude. So, he didn't want to ever fail at anything. And I think we were one of the things that he didn't want to fail at. And he supported us, like I always say, for like 8 years. And then, that's when, we finally got, national recognition with the yoga study, the first yoga and mindfulness study on the effectiveness of it on urban youth through Johns Hopkins and Penn State. And then after that, it was like a snowball effect of support financially from foundations and from media outlets, and then after the media outlets and the study, all his friends were like, "Oh yeah, man, he was on to something." You know what I mean? So yeah, but
Yeah.
we definitely humbled and appreciate the support that three pillars gave us. It was him, our godfather, and our mom. She made sure we ate. Like she would drop off packages of food because like we didn't have two pennies to rub together for the first 8 years. So through the combination of that tripod, it helped support our tripod.
That's so powerful because I was, as you both were talking, I was thinking 20 years ago, mindfulness and yoga, especially within the school systems and so on, it wasn't as popular as it is now. It wasn't so, embedded within, you had John Kabat-Zinn and all these other people that kind of made it more popular. How was it in the beginning received when you were talking about mindfulness and yoga, especially as a form of really addressing some of America's biggest issues like poverty and violence?
I mean, like you said, it wasn't very common, at least not as much as it is now. You hear mindfulness everywhere. You see yoga in media and all over TV shows and movies. I remember we were first working with the kids, and we would even say the word yoga. They look at us like, yogurt, Yoda, like they didn't.
Yoda?
The word, yeah, Yoda, yeah, right. The word
Yeah.
wasn't familiar to them. It wasn't like it was now. So I think initially it was received with skepticism from a lot of the kids and a lot of the programs that we did, because it wasn't as popular as it was today. But I think that we all saw the transformation that occurred within us with our practice, and we embodied the practice of something that our teacher really, really emphasized. You had to be authentic. You had to actually be a scientist, do the techniques, do the practices on yourself, see what the results were. We saw what they were. We saw, what good it could do, not only for us, but our community and for mankind in general. And I think that us going into these communities and these programs that we had and just being the practice, I would always say yoga isn't something you do, it's something you are. And I think that was something that was really evident in the three of us in our practice, so that we resonated that energy. So, the kids may not have been down to do it or been skeptical or like, this is lame, whatever, I don't want to do this. But we were pretty cool guys. And they saw that we were like, man, we need to try to do this. And usually, for all the listeners, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that once you try it, once you do the experiment on yourself, once you take some breaths or you start incorporating some movement or some meditation into your life, it can almost be instantaneous that you see and feel those benefits. And you become more present in the moment instead of being in the past or the future. You start to learn to love your real self more, which in turn allows you to love others. And that love and that compassion that Ali was talking about, that we saw that was missing in the world, it grows. And I think it's something that we saw when we were working with our first group of kids, and throughout all these 20-some years now, is we're just kind of planting the seed and reminding people these techniques and practices and this ability within themselves, to let their light shine, like our book says. And I think that we just wanted to be the conduit, right, to keep passing on these practices and these techniques to help out as many people help themselves. People oftentimes say that we save people's lives or we help. We don't do any of that stuff. We're just reminding people, and they're the ones that are taking control of their own lives and learning how to self-regulate and how to be more present and loving.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. First, I just want to say thank you for planting seeds, because I think all of the people who planted those seeds way, way back were helping humanity. We're helping us get to this point. So it must have been difficult to go 8 years without seeing the fruits of your labor. But so thank you for holding on to that stubbornness and the vision. You mentioned some of the outcomes that you yourself experienced. You mentioned a few. Can you share a little bit more in terms of how it changed your life by implementing this mindfulness in yoga, especially since it seemed, and I could be wrong, that you grew up in a neighborhood that was more like violent and more poverty stricken? Is that accurate?
It is. I mean, honestly, when we graduated from school, we moved back to the neighborhood that Ali and I grew up in. And, it was, I remember one weekend, three people got murdered within our two block radius. The open air drug markets, dilapidated housing. They call our neighborhood like the blue light district because there's like surveillance cameras like on every other corner with like blue lights, like the police siren or police lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very depressing neighborhood and very scary for some folks. But in the midst of all that stuff, we were blissing out, and it was because of the practice. A lot of our friends used to come to our neighborhood and ask us, like, "Yo, like y'all are broke, y'all don't have no car, y'all live in one of the worst, most dangerous neighborhoods in America, and like y'all are happy. Why the hell are y'all happy?" And we would return the question and be like, "Well, y'all have great jobs." Y'all married, y'all live in great neighborhoods, y'all have nice cars, and you're miserable. You know what I mean? So it must be something to what we're doing. And honestly, we realized from that point on that we needed to share this with other people, along with the fact that, when Ali, Andy, and I are like big Star Wars and like Marvel comic book, heads. And, we were always trying to figure out, like, man, we want to be superheroes so we can, save the world. And during that time, that was like, when we were in our last year of school, we were also searching for like, what is the point of life? Why are we here? It has to be more, like Ali usually says, like it has to be more than just graduating, getting a job, getting married, having some kids, retiring and dying. There has to be more to it. So we've read a lot of books, and, whether it's, philosophy, creational theories, ancient history, astronomy, astrology, and we were looking for what the purpose of our existence. And the more we read, the more questions we had, and they would always say the answers are within, the answers are within. We looked at each other like, man, how the hell do you go within? And during that time, our teacher, who was me and Ali's godfather, he had been trying to get us into yoga for the longest time. And we just thought he was crazy. Like, we would be sitting around his island in his kitchen, and we would, be drinking a Heineken or something, and watching basketball. And in the midst of us watching basketball and enjoying ourselves, he'd like point to the Heineken and be like, you're putting toxins in your body. You need to learn how to get them out and start doing yoga breath called Kapalabhati, where they call it the breath of fire, where you're exhaling 3 breaths per second, and that like detoxifies your body. And at that time, we would look at each other like, man, this dude is crazy, and get up and leave. But, I think that once we were looking for a teacher and looking for the answers that are within, we realized how much of a gem he was. And we actually saw like a yoga manual that taught you a lot of like meditations where, you could like, it was esoteric stuff like maintain your body without eating. What meditation can you do if there isn't a hospital, and other stuff like that. And we're like, yo, yoga can make you become like a superhero. And he was like, well, that's part of it. That's a distraction. But honestly, what it is to unite your individual self with your universal self. And, the other stuff are just byproducts. And all of us were like, yo, can you teach us? And, what he said is that, you got to make me 2 promises. You have to wake up at 4:30 in the morning, an hour and a half before sunrise, to practice with me. And the second thing is you got to promise to be teachers. And honestly, that's another reason why, besides, seeing people suffering, is we made a promise to our teacher that he said he would teach us any and everything if we decided to be teachers. And the first population that we taught were the people in our community, because there was so much suffering, so much undiagnosed trauma. And, like Andy said, like we always say, is that, the best thing to do is, not have people dependent on you. Our teacher was like, man, I don't want no devotees. I want to create teachers. That's what we did, is we wanted to create teachers. So we empower people with the practice of how to do the practice, what the benefits are, and how to practically apply it into your life. And, it started off in our hood, but then it's expanded, like you said, around the nation and around the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. You said so many amazing things. I just want to highlight a few. Number one being that it's happiness, joy, bliss. It's an inside job. You guys can show the way and you're the light keepers, but people have to be willing to be able to do that work. And I think that's what people sometimes struggle with. Like sometimes we want to be saved, but the truth of the matter is we're only going to save ourselves. And so you demonstrate that beautifully in saying you can be in a quote unquote terrible environment and still be blissing out, or you can be in a yacht, in Capri and have all the money in the world and still be miserable, because wherever you go, there you are, right? So I think that's really important. I wanted to mention I am so into esoteric and as far as our mind and our thoughts can take us. So if you're interested in more supernatural stuff, Lee Holden, who is my qigong teacher, has done a little documentary on like being able to see beyond. It's really quite a cool. It's called Supernatural or something. And Dr. Joe Dispenza also does that stuff. I just thought it would be interesting in terms of like seeing how far we can go in terms of bending reality and so on. But I want to go back to your comment about the impact, because as I was thinking about your work, I was thinking, I have young children. I've been trying, like my husband and I have been teaching them to love themselves and to practice. They're just not into meditation. So how do you engage young people in a way that gets them to move away from that resistance and that distractibility, especially now with electronics, to want to embrace the kind of work that you do?
So I think it's different teaching your own kids versus teaching other people's kids. And so I know when my boys were born, when my oldest son was born, we had been teaching kids for probably a little over a decade. No, 2006. We've probably been teaching kids for about 5 years. By the time my oldest son was born, people were asking me like, well, how are you going to teach him? Like, when are you going to show him yoga and show him how to meditate and all these things? And it wasn't really that. It was just me practicing around him and waiting for him to ask the right questions to decide that he wanted to take that journey with the practice. So I would be sitting on my mat doing the breath of fire, or doing Sat Kriya, and he would just come and sit on my lap and stare at me, or he would see me meditating. We kind of sit down next to me on the couch or whatever. So it's just like he was around and he was asking those questions. So I think when you're dealing with your own kids, you have to make it something where you wait for them to be ready for it and not use it as a punishment. Make it fun and mold the practice not around what your practice is, but mold it around what's going to benefit them and what they're interested in. When we're in schools, it's a little. I mean, it's a little easier because we show up in a school. We're not their teacher. We're not their parents. Like, we're the fun guys from the outside that are coming in to show them something new. And it's a lot of the same things. Make it fun, make it engaging, show them how it's going to help with their struggles, and meet them where they are. A lot of kids, I feel like a lot of people that want to teach mindfulness in schools, or yoga for that matter, they'll go in with an idea of exactly what they want to teach, or they're teaching from a curriculum, or they walk in with their class structure. But if you walk in there, you're not going to give the kids what they need if you walk in with that mentality. We always say you got to be ready to throw it all out the window and listen to the kids, because kids will tell you what they need. Like, if you listen to them with your ear, with your heart, and energetically, they'll tell you exactly what they need, and you can give them that. That's why when we train our teachers at the Holistic Life Foundation, we don't use curriculum. We don't use things along those lines. We give them a toolbox where they can go in and just teach them how to really be present and listen. And a part of that is coming from having your own personal practice. Like, when you have your own personal practice and you can feel and experience that stillness and that peace and that inner love and that inner connection, like, it starts there. And like you said, it vibrates out, and then you can start to feel it from the people around you. But you can also feel when those people around you are suffering. And if you listen to them, you'll know what to present them with, so that they can practice to heal themselves up. So I think it's similar, but it's definitely more difficult teaching your own kids than it is teaching other people's kids.
Just to add a little something else, as far as meditation, a lot of people just try to like jump straight into the meditation when they try to teach people or teach kids. And, sometimes that can do more harm than good, the style of meditation that you teach. Because, when kids are just sitting in silence, they get lost in their own thoughts, traumas can pop up, and, all that type of stuff. So, what we do is we kind of have a skeleton when we teach practices in general, contemplative practices. We always do something physical to kind of get rid of that restless energy and then make their body a safe space. Then we do some breathing practices to kind of still their mind, and then they'll be ready for meditation. But we don't, we have more of a guided meditation where we're kind of leading them to a specific path instead of the silence that will let their mind wander. So, until, like Ali was saying, until they actually, develop their own practice, it's really good to kind of have that blueprint of physical practice, breathing, and then meditation, guided meditation. And then once they kind of have that adapted, then you can kind of let them do their own thing. And, through repetition, even if there is silence, they'll hear you in their mind, leading them through the practices. So they'll still have a kind of guided meditation, while there is silence. So, that's pretty much, besides what Ali was saying, that's kind of how we approach it.
Yeah, and if you think about it, what Atmos talk about is a very trauma-informed way of presenting the work. But I mean, the 8 limbs are already trauma-informed if you follow them. I mean, like that's the way that yoga's set up. Like you talk about the embodiment with the yamas and the niyamas. Like, what are you doing in your life to embody the practice? You do the movement to make the body a safe space. You do the breath work to slow the mind down, and then you jump into your meditation. So it's a science for a reason. It's sustained for thousands of years for a reason, because it works if you teach it the right way. I think people try to like pick pieces out of it or teach it in a way, again, back to the curriculum thing. They try to go like, well, this is going to be day 1 and this is going to be day 2 and this is going to be day 3 and we have to do this type of yoga. I mean, but like, the way it was originally set up, it works. It's got to be adapted for modern times a little bit in its presentation, but the way that it's structured, it works if you do it that way.
Yeah, Patanjali was onto something.
Yeah. Andres, do you have any thoughts?
No, they covered it pretty
Oh,
good.
okay, cool. Yeah. So what you were both talking about is, I think, what Andres mentioned earlier, which is that embodiment, right? When you're embodying that, you can get a sense of what people need in the moment and give them what they need rather than what you come with in terms of your framework. And so I think that's really important. I also wanted to mention, Ali, you're a better parent than me, because I kind of had to learn that later on. I learned about self-compassion and self-love and meditation and qigong and movement, all that stuff later on. And so I kind of had to learn what you just mentioned, which is allowing the kids to have their own journey and allowing them to be curious. And if that's not their journey, then that's not their journey. And so I think that's a beautiful way to put it, and to be open to sharing what they're interested in. I find with my kids in particular, like they kind of want to explore their own things, which for me, it means they're safely secure, because they're like, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else. And it's like, awesome. Wonderful. Can you tell me a little bit more about some of how this program is embedded within schools? You mentioned you kind of come in and do kind of like a pop in. And the reason why I ask this question is because I've had experiences where you drop in and you do something and then you leave. But how can we weave this as part of the natural school system or in different environments in a way that would make it sustainable? One of the worries that I always have is sometimes when you have these programs and the budgets get cut, like these are the first programs that go. So how do you weave it into the system so that even if you are cut, it's still kind of within the culture, so much so that it could continue?
We have a wide variety of programming, right? I would say one of the main ways we weave it in is the way that we lead the practices. So similar to how our teacher said to us, hey, I'm not teaching students, I'm teaching teachers. We do that. We use a reciprocal teaching model. So when we go into the schools and we do these programs, whether it's the full school-wide initiative, whether it's little pop-ins, whether it's residencies, that we're always teaching the kids to be teachers. So I remember when we used to have our after-school program, there would be 90 kids in the gym, the 3 of us, and it wasn't us leading the practices. It'd be a little kindergartner in the front leading through sun salutations or doing the asanas for everybody. And it's to make them embody the practice and empowers them too. So now they are these leaders and they go out in their communities and they make difference and they change stuff. And similar in the schools, you start finding that the kids, once they start seeing the true benefits of these practices, that they'll raise their hand and say, hey, teacher, we're about to take a quiz. Can I lead everybody through the stress breath? And they're the ones leading it. So even if we step away, sorry, the puppy's going
right now. Sorry. Even if I have a dog.
If we step away, then they're still running the programs. They're the ones that can facilitate the practices, because it's really not that hard once they learn how to do it. And it's like you said, I think you hit it right on the nose. The culture of the school or whatever facility starts transforming and changing, and this becomes common to see the kids doing some breath work or meditating to learn how to self-regulate and using these practices. So we're really we don't want people to rely on us. We want to come in, guide and lead as we can, but when we step back, it's kind of a machine itself, and it's rolling, and it just becomes part of daily routine. Like, hey, at this school now, we breathe or we meditate. And I think that's what really allows it to stay sustainable and make an impact, not only inside the school, but in the surrounding community as well. Because then the kids go home and they'll see mom, be like, Mom, you look stressed out. Sit down. I'm going to take some breaths. And then it just transforms the entire area.
And I think one thing we're really good at is train the trainer programs. Like, there are those people who are in school buildings who are adults that connect to the kids very, very well. They're good at diffusing situations. They're good at connecting with the kids and getting them to kind of feel safe enough to share. We're good at going into the building and adding mindfulness and yoga and breath work and meditation to their skill set so they can make a bigger impact in the school. So even if the budget does get cut, like, they're already in the building. So you might find those mindfulness champions that will actually be training to become mindfulness champions in the building, so that, like, they can still do all they're doing, but they're also empowering the kids with practices to help them with mental health issues, to help them heal from trauma, to deal with anxiety, to deal with that lack of connection, all those things that kids are suffering from these days. And it's become one of our major ways of helping people around the country, because, it's kind of unfair for us to go into a school and we go there for a week and, like, we make the practices really fun. We've been teaching them for a long time and everyone's all excited about mindfulness. And then we go away and they're like, what the hell do we do now? Like, this is like, what are we supposed to do? So I think we want to make it sustainable. We want to make it stick. We want to make it effective when we're gone. So I feel like our train the trainer is probably the most impactful thing that we can do to help people outside of direct service, but outside of Baltimore, and when we're going in other places, it's that train the trainer where we can find those people and train them up to just enhance what they're already bringing to the school community.
Wow, that is so important, because what you're talking about is that kind of bottom up approach and sort of middle up approach as well. Do the leaders ever take any of your programs? Because I definitely, as a leader, I would see that as something that I would want to take too. Because I mean, I know people that are vice principals and so on, and they get very stressed out. So to be able to breathe before you're managing something difficult would be great.
So we made the mistake for over a decade of going into a school and only working with the students there. And that doesn't work, because the teachers are more stressed out than the students in a lot of cases, because they're dealing with their own life stress and they're dealing with the secondary trauma and the burnout they're dealing with from working with the kids. So then we started working with the teachers for a while. And it wasn't until we started our Mindful Moment program that we started working with the principals. And we realized that that's where we had to start every single time. You got to start with leadership, because it all trickles down, whether it's that stress domino of, like, starting with the principal and going to the teachers, to the students bringing home to the parents. So, like, it's coming from everywhere. So we know that we won't walk into a building if we can't work with everyone in the building. And, we've done leadership outside of schools as well. City Council President Zeke Cohen here in Baltimore started this Healing Cities Act, where he's trying to make Baltimore, well, he's kind of made Baltimore a trauma-informed city. So,
Nice.
So what we did trainings for around, like, trauma-informed yoga and mindfulness for the mayor, for the city council, for the heads of all the city agencies. We've done deep dives with Parks and Recs, with the libraries, with the state's attorney's office, with the housing authority. And next we're going to work with all the firefighters in the city. So, like, like, there's a space for it in the community outside of schools, because adults are suffering too, not just the kids. But it's got to start with that leadership every single time. And if you can get a leader that's brought in and then, like, totally sold on the program's not going to go anywhere. It's always going to be there, and it's always going to sustain and keep growing.
And I love that you're also creating leaders within the school as well. So even if that leader changes, you've got kids that can really step up into the leadership. And so you are shaping the future, which is amazing. Yeah. I wanted to ask about, in the information that was shared with me, you talk about that your program has, I mean, so many amazing outcomes in terms of, like anxiety and stress and self-esteem. One of the things that stuck out to me in particular was about self-care and self-love. Can you tell me a little bit about how they differ and about how you're working with that?
Yeah, I can chime in. So I think one thing we noticed a lot, when we were working with the kids, initially you could see how we're giving them these practices. It's like you said, everyone's really focusing on how the kids can, how it's going to impact them in school. So can they focus better? Are they concentrating more? Removing ruminating thoughts to be present. This, dealing with conflict in a more peaceful manner. So these conflict resolution skills, and that's like the focus on everyone. Like, how can we get the kids to do better with these programs in terms of school, education, academics? And it was funny. We would see the main thing that was really happening was they learned to love themselves, and that is what the real transformation, where the real transformation occurred, because they learned to love themselves. And now they're looking at themselves differently. They don't see themselves separate from everyone else. They start to feel more interconnected with all their peers. And they're not just part of, the west side of Baltimore or the city of Baltimore or the state of Maryland or the United States, but they're part of everyone and everything. And I think that when they started learning to love themselves, it allowed them to see other people and be more empathetic and compassionate to others. And they learn to love others more. And they start seeing, well, Johnny's going through something today, and they empathize with him more because they're like, I know sometimes I go through that too. And I think that self-love is really, really important for everyone in the world, but in particular with youth, when they learn to love themselves and they start seeing themselves in everyone, every other thing. And it's like, well, why would I treat anyone or anything negatively or, with hatred when they're just another version of me? And they start loving everyone and everything. And that's when I think everything starts to gel. I think you need to learn to love yourself first, right? That self-love before you can take care of yourself, right? Because if you don't know who you really are and you're not loving yourself, then you can't really take care of yourself. I think then with the practices, they start, and some of the concepts that we discuss, when they start learning about, taking care of themselves, that's not selfish, right? One phrase that we use a lot is that, people oftentimes are giving from their well, right? But they give from their well until it's empty. And that's not what we should be doing as human beings. We need to take care of ourselves, do those things that make, I don't know, this is like makes our hearts, our soul smile, the things that we really love to do, and take care of ourselves first so that our cup is overflowing. And that's what you give from, is the overflow. So then you're always functioning at 100%, if not more than 100%, right? But most of the time, people want to just give and give and give, and they, they'll set themselves on fire to keep other people warm. And that's not a way to live or to function. And I think with these practices, as they start to learn how to love themselves, part of that is the understanding, hey, I need to take care of myself as well. And if not, then I'm just giving from a half empty cup, and no one wants to do that. You're not really giving fully. So I hope that answered your question a little in terms of the difference.
It absolutely did, yeah. And it reminds me about the whole, airplane thing. You got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help others. Otherwise, you're no good to anyone. And I'm also very appreciative because I saw the whole concept of self-love on the outcomes that you list. And I think that is so important, especially for men, especially young men, because I think, and this is just my perspective, I could be wrong, I think we really do a disservice for young men in particular. I think that we, as a society, we've kind of done like, don't ask for nurturance, diminish your crying and your vulnerability, and focus only on anger and focus only on like connection through sex. And so I think that by allowing young people to be okay with their vulnerability, to love themselves and to accept themselves, and especially for our boys, I think it's so important. So I am very grateful to have seen that on your information. Any thoughts about kind of in particular self-love for boys?
Yeah, so it's funny as you were saying that, I started smiling because it was like, if you look at the way that our generation was raised, like just the movies and the TV shows, and like you can't cry, and you got to push down all your emotions. Like, we were set up for failure. You know what I mean? Like, we were set up for like emotional failure, just because of the way that our parents were doing the best they could with the information they had. But it was, I feel like I like the fact that this generation, they're under the right circumstances, they're learning to be tough, but they're also learning to be in touch with their emotions as well. Like, I feel like at some points they can get carried a little too far, and then like the toughness is taken out of like life in general. But I mean, like, you do need resilience. You do need to be mentally tough. You do need that strength. You can't crumble at everything that happens to you. You know what I mean? Like, so I think there has to be that balance of the toughness and being in touch with your emotions to be able to express that. And I think the kids that are coming up now do have an opportunity to do that, again, under the right circumstances. But again, there has to be that balance, because there are a lot of kids that do that. I'm not going to say they're too in touch with. I think they're not in touch with their tough side, or the resilience that you need to get through life, because life is going to be difficult. Life is going to knock you down, and you can't just focus on being sad and being knocked down. Part of life is focusing on that getting back up, but not only getting back up, but getting back up stronger every time life does knock you down, because it's going to happen over and over and over again throughout your life. So I think it's that balance. And again, I'm just happy the kids are there, and we do talk about self-love with the boys. I mean, because there's a reason that, like, boys are so angry. There's a reason that boys are so disconnected. There's a reason that the murder rates are so high in some cities, because a lot of these young boys don't have any regard for human life. And you can't ask them to care about someone else's life, to be nice to someone else, to care about the environment, to care about their city, if they don't even care about themselves. So, like, why am I going to care about them and I don't give a damn about myself? So, like, once we can take the time for them to, and that's one of the most beautiful things about what we bring to the kids, is that we give them the ability to connect with themselves. Because, like, most of the kids we notice were only connected to their physical environment, which can be very bleak, can feel very helpless and very hopeless most of the time. So, like, if that's all you're connected to, I'd be mad too. I would be pissed off at everything too. I would be like, I would just be angry all the time. But once with the practice, you connect to your true self, like, connect to that, let your light shine, you connect to that, you connect to that higher purpose, like, you connect to that, what all the things that are, like, stirring inside of us that most people ignore. Uncle Will used to always say that we're ignorant of the light, not that we aren't aware of it, but just that we ignore it. We're so focused on the outside world, and, like, once you can turn them inward and they can start to feel that peace and that stillness, they connect to something greater, and they're like, oh, I'm not just this in this neighborhood, I'm connected to the entire planet. And you see them start to change. You see them start to interact with themselves differently. And then once they start to interact with themselves differently, you start to see them become more compassionate, more loving, and more empathetic to the people around them. And it's beautiful to see, because we've seen it with so many kids that have started off as angry little kids in our program that are now helping out their community. That some of them have worked for us, some of them still work for us, and they want to give to the world, and they want to go explore outside of their neighborhood and outside of their city. And they're going all over the place, and they're doing these amazing things because the gift that was given to us by Uncle Will, we gave to them, and they're giving that gift to other people, that gift of, like, connection to your true self.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was so powerful. Kind of forgot what I was going to say. Oh, actually, I do remember. One of the things you mentioned is resiliency. And I think that's what you're teaching. You're teaching mastery. Because if you can take your focus away from the environment, all the challenges and everything, and focus inward, and from that place, find peace, find happiness, and then focus on your thoughts to create your dream life, then you have mastered this experience. And I think, like you said, we teach children to focus just on the physical. Look at your environment. This is reality. This is real. This is all that stuff. And so they focus so much outwardly that to bring them back to themselves is such a gift, such a gift.
As you were saying, one thing that Uncle Will used to always say to us that still echoes in my head daily, constantly, several times a day, it's like, it's easier to go from the inside out than it is from the outside in. He would always say, you start your day in the light every single day, because then you have your frame of reference in truth and in your real self, and then you can go out into the world and do it that way. But it's harder, like you were saying, you're going outward, and then to remind yourself to come back inward. But start your day in the light, end your day in the light, and because it's a lot easier to go from the inside out than it is from the outside in. He would always tell us that.
Oh, you need to make some Uncle Willie stickers. You can give them to the kids so that they get Uncle Willie says, like, I think that would be amazing, because then they can put them on their backpacks and so on. Anyways, I wanted to read this quote because I think it's super, super important. It's actually what drew me to want to have this conversation. And that is, a school replaced detention with meditation, and the results are stunning. Having worked in child welfare, I have observed children who dysregulate because, school is a hard day at the office, and Mother's Day, Father's Day, all that stuff is very triggering. Kids having the cops called on them. I've seen teachers that weren't able to manage behavior, and that their only response is a punitive response that then kind of trickles down. Can you share a little bit about how your program has helped these schools shift from punitive to supportive outcomes?
I can start off, guys. The program that you're talking about is our Mindful Moment program. And the premise of the program is, for one, we have a alternative to suspension room. I guess that's what everybody was talking about, changing detention to meditation. And that wasn't our aim. That's just what happened. We created this space in the oasis in the school where it's like, oil diffusers, Himalayan salt crystals, fountains, everything to make like a serene place in the school, natural lighting, plants, all that type of stuff. When kids are in crisis, instead of them getting punished, like you were saying, punitive action, they come to our room. They can either refer themselves, or teachers or administrators can refer them to come down to our room where we have it staffed by HLF. And, when the kids come in there, we actively listen and mirror to empower them, because people are always talking at kids and never listening. So that kind of, chips off a little bit of the anxiety and the stress as soon as they come into the room. Then we talk to the kids about stresses, and how the stress plays out in their body. Is your teacher stressing you? Is it a peer stressing you? Is it something that you're thinking about that happened earlier in that day? And when you do get stressed, how does it play out in your body? Do you clench your fist? Do you clench your jaw? Do you fold your arms? Do you shift your weight? Do you play with your hair? And then, we explain that to them. And then we go through a breathing practice or a meditation. And, that kind of helps them achieve homeostasis. And then we ask the kids, the students, the young people, so the next time you see that stressor, or you feel that stress playing out in their body, do you think that you can do this practice, which you can see can kind of calm you down? And, the kids like, yeah, I'll try it. And they may not try it right away, but eventually they do try it, and they learn how to self-regulate. And I think one of the beautiful things about that part of the program is the numbers start off really, really high at the beginning of the year, but as the year progresses, they dwindle. The frequency of kids coming to the room dwindles down next to nothing, because the kids do learn how to self-regulate. And then, we have like a school-wide practice too. So it's like a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 intervention, where if, at the beginning of the school day in elementary schools, it's at the beginning of first period. In high schools, it's at the end of first period, to give the kids a grace period to get to school. And, we'll do a series of movement in the elementary schools, breath work, and meditations. In the high schools, they don't want to stand out. So it's just like breathing and meditation. And then we also go into like do push-ins into classrooms where, we pay attention to when kids are bouncing off the walls, like after lunch or during transition periods. And our staff go to the room and, work with, small cohorts in the classes. And then we also have that Mindful Ambassadors program where we train a certain percentage of the student population to help infuse these practices into the school day. So like during testing time, they can lead their peers to certain breathing practices that can help with test anxiety. And, basically it just infuses these practices into the entire school. I think one of the most beautiful anecdotal evidence that we have of the effectiveness of this program is, at the high school that we first started the program at Patterson High School in Baltimore. They were known for like fights and riots, honestly. They were on like that crazy World Star hip hop site a lot for the amount of fights that they had at that school. But, as we infused this program into the school, the principal had no idea the impact that it was making on the school climate until he went to another school and saw how hectic the school was, how frictional it was, and how unempathetic the students were with each other. And when he got back to the school, he was going to go to our mindful moment room. And our staff, like I said, they do push-ins into classrooms, so the door was locked, and no kids could get into the room. Yet there was a student sitting outside of the room doing breathing and meditating. And he called us up. He was like, yo, this program is amazing. Not only was it amazing that the kid was doing breathing and meditation outside of the classroom, And, our classroom was right outside of the most frequented hall space in the entire school. He said it was amazing that, he's like, last year, if a kid was sitting with his eyes closed, meditating in front of a room, a kid might have punched him or kicked him in the face. But now it's just a common occurrence. It's just become part of what the school is. And, that in turn has shift in the school climate is the reason why the detention numbers went down, the suspension numbers went down, attendance went up, test scores go up. And everywhere this program is run with high fidelity, the same thing happens. And, I think that's why, people always refer to it as a program that changed attention to meditation. All we did was just kind of bring these contemplative practices into the school and help empower these kids with self-regulation.
And I think, just adding to what Oprah was saying, I think above and beyond changing the attention and meditation, most of what we were doing was changing the students. Because like the kids are vibrating in a different way than most other people on the planet. And the schools are set up in such a way that it's not serving them. Like you figure there's no real creativity. Like most schools don't have art or music. The kids are supposed to sit in a classroom the entire day. They're not doing any movement. A lot of schools don't have gym. They don't have recess. Everything's punitive. So you do this, you go to the office. You do this, you go get sent home. You do this, you go get sent to detention. And, the kids need something different. So I think what we were doing was we were giving them the skills and the tools to be able to deal with the way that the schools were set up that weren't serving them. So like we were giving them practices to, that inner peace that's within every single one of us. We showed them how to find it, and then we showed them what it felt like to drift away from it, but then we showed them how to bring themselves back to it. So like they always had a skill, they always had a place to go, whether it was outside of them, whether it was their thoughts, whatever was just kind of destroying their peace, we were giving them tools to get back to that peace and that stillness. So I think that's what the main thing was. Like we've been talking about empowerment and reciprocal teaching the whole time, but we're all about empowering people with the practice so that they can heal and save themselves. So I think that's what the big part of this mindful moment program is, changing it changed attention to meditation because the kids were changing. They were different people. They weren't so impulsive. They weren't stuck in sympathetic dominance. You know what I mean? There was the things that were going on where they were healing from the trauma they've been through, and they were learning to deal with the anger and the anxiety and the stress and the depression, the things that were making them act out. And it just shifted their worldview and the way they viewed themselves and treated themselves and treated everybody around them.
And as Ali said earlier, we don't just work with the kids, we work with the teachers as well. So, another aspect of the program is, working during their teachers' professional development days, teaching them practices, not to bring into the classroom, but for self-care. There's so much turnover and burnout and secondary trauma that they face that, not only, do the teachers have like a Herculean task to teach the students, stay on course with the curriculum and, help the kids with their issues and, all this other stuff, but they're dealing with a lot of secondary trauma that they don't know how to release. And, what our staff do is, during the professional development days, and then when they have their planning periods, we go in there and work with the teachers and administrators to kind of help them de-stress, release that secondary trauma and be more present. And, that them coming from a lens where they're not as aggressive to the students also helps with that, changing the classroom and the school environment. And I think that's why this program is so impactful, because not only does it work with the staff, but, it helps empower the teachers and administrators as well.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge, because having worked in leadership for many, many years at several not-for-profits, I know how difficult it is to change a culture. I know how easy it is to make it negative, but how much work and attention and intention it takes to make a culture that is positive and loving. How much time do you guys often spend within, like, let's say, give me just an example of how much time would you spend in a school in order to be able to have some of these outcomes?
I think it varies. A lot of times it depends on where the school's at. Some schools you'll go into there and they have instructors who are already leading mindfulness practices or doing some breath work. Administration's really down with it. You go to another school and they've never done any of that type of stuff. There
Mm.
might be pushback from the adults, like, oh, you're taking away my academic time. I need it all the time I can just to teach, and I don't have time to do this mindfulness type stuff. So I think it really does varies on a case-to-case basis. When we do something like the Mindful Moment program, it's a school-wide initiative, so you're going to see the results quicker because the entire school is being involved in this, and you have stuff on a loudspeaker where the kids or the teachers are saying, hey, ignore that. It's still being heard. It's being part of the day. It's present throughout the entire school year. Sometimes when we go into schools and do a residency, that's just us in there for a week. The idea is to teacher training, get them to start implementing the programs during transition times or whenever they can. It just may take longer for it really to impact the culture. So I wish I had more of like it'll take four doses of this and 3 of this and this many weeks and you're good. The program will
Yeah.
be rock. But it really just varies, where we're going to, where their level of mindfulness or being present practices are, and us just trying to be there to support and be a resource for them to start incorporating all these practices into the school. So it does become, like we've been saying, just commonplace, and the culture of the school shifts. And it's like when we're going through adversity, we do breathe it. And it's just when language, everyone's reinforcing the practices. That's when you really see that transformation occur.
And I think what you said is very important because you're meeting people where they're at. Instead of what Ali was saying, you're not coming in with here's my box, fit into my box. It's like, okay, oh, what do you need? All right, so maybe we'll do this and we'll implement this. And I think that comes from all the years of wisdom that you've been doing it. I'm going to give you your flowers. Some of the most amazing outcomes you've had are obviously emotional well-being, resiliency, decrease in stress and anxiety, decrease in school suspensions, healing trauma, increasing compassion and empathy, especially for people at risk. Are there any outcomes that you found surprising?
Do you mean for just in general or for in schools?
Anything.
I'd say I'd say some of the most surprising work for me has been in the drug treatment centers with adults that we've worked in. Just how much, like people use drugs for a myriad of reasons and they abuse them for a myriad of reasons, but they're looking for something, you know what I mean? They're looking for something to take away a certain amount of pain or bring some joy, whatever they're doing. But I think just seeing them realize that there's something inside of them that they can find stillness, they can find peace, they can find happiness, they can find joy, and then how much they take to the practice and want to share it with other people, and how much you see them brighten up almost instantly from like learning about the breath, learning about some movement, learning about like deep spiritual forms of meditation to connect them to that light within themselves, and then just seeing how it shifts and transforms them. I think that's always one of the places I enjoy teaching most is adult treatments, drug treatment centers for adults, because of like the almost instant shift that like even after the first class, like you see them, they're like, damn, like, okay, so I've been looking, whatever I've been looking for, I've been looking in the wrong places and for the wrong things. Like it's inside of me, and I'm going to keep coming back to learn how to tap into it. And it's just, and it's amazing to see because they do go home and they do teach other people. I remember there was one drug treatment center that we were working at that the clients loved us so much and were getting so much out of the practice that the last day, no one showed up. Like we had a contract for, I think it was like it was several months. And the last they were expecting like a big, like, hey, and then we were like, where is everybody? It was like they couldn't say goodbye to you all. Like they loved what you all were teaching so much that they were just like, they stepped away, and that was the end of it. We didn't see them again. But like, bumping into people out on the streets of Baltimore, because Baltimore's not a huge city, and they'll stop us and like, hey, well, I'm still using this practice, I'm still using that practice. But I wasn't expecting that much of a shift with that population. But I mean, it made total sense once we saw it, but I don't think I was expecting that when we first went into the drug treatment centers for adults.
No. Thank you so much, because I think you mentioned something that is really crucial for people to understand. I think this war on drugs and everything, we think that that's the outcome, then we got to decrease drug use, when really that's the coping. You got to address the real problem, which is the reason why people are using drugs. Like people wanting to escape their own reality or wanting to tap into something else that's beyond what they're experiencing. And what you're doing this is you're giving them different options, which is, I think, so important. A few more questions, if that's okay. I wanted to ask what you thought unconditional love means to you. What does unconditional love mean?
I can start off. I would say, unconditional love for me is that you're loving and you're not doing it for a purpose. You're not looking for results or something to come back to you. You're just loving because that's kind of what we're supposed to do as human beings anyways, right? There's a form of yoga that our teacher would always talk about. We'll always talk about bhakti yoga and respect. We would say, it's the easiest form of yoga and it's the hardest because it's the easiest because you have to love everybody. That doesn't seem that hard, but it's the hardest because you have to love everyone, because that means you have to love those people that are the murderers and, the douchebags, right? And the people that are, so it's hard to love everyone, but it's also easy because it's love, right? Love is great. And so he would take the word respect and he'd say, real way to look at respect is to break it into two words, re like again, and spect like spectacle. So to look again. And he would say that when we look at people, we see them for their physical bodies. And then when we respect them, we look again and we see the light within them, which is the light within us. And we love them because they are just another version of us. And I think that's, for me, what real unconditional love is just loving because I'm supposed to love. I'm not doing it for a purpose. I'm not doing it to receive anything. I'm not doing it to get anything. It's just loving because that's what we should be doing as human beings, because really we're just reflections of each other. So my mom is one that's really, really embodied that practice, I think. And she just gives and gives and gives and loves so much. It could be strangers, it could be anyone. She just loves and she does it. She's not trying to get somebody to love her back. She just is like, this is what I think is right. And this is what feels right to me. It's just loving because we all love anyways.
I love that.
Just as you were saying it, I was definitely thinking about bhakti yoga and what Andy was saying, because Uncle Will would always talk about that. But I feel like unconditional love has to start with loving yourself unconditionally. A lot of people like the outside world tears you down, but like that negative self-talk and that inner critic can tear you down more than anyone outside of you. You have to deal with those low vibrational thoughts and all that's bringing you down. But I think when you can love yourself through all of that unconditionally, and not just the good parts, people only want to love the good parts of themselves, but you got to love those like kind of quote unquote dark or bad parts of yourself, those low vibrational parts of yourself, the parts that you might not like that much, but those parts of you have taken you on your life journey as well. Like you wouldn't be where you were without those, the yin and the yang. Like you need the light parts, you need the dark parts, you need all of that to make the whole. So I think you got to really, really love yourself in that way. And then you can start to see that love in the people around you. But I think another part of that unconditional love is part of it has to be loving with boundaries. You know what I mean? Like you can't love so much because people will see people who are loving and they'll take advantage of them and they'll get over on them. But I think you have to have enough unconditional love for yourself that you can love with those boundaries when you know, like, all right, this person's getting over on me. I'm not going to stop loving them, but I'm just going to love them at a distance. You know what I mean? I can not have them in my energy and in my personal space. They can be gone, but I can still send them love. So I think that all that ties into that unconditional love.
Well, I could listen to you guys like literally all day. I was wondering if, as a last question, can you share about yourself? Where can people find you? Where can people work with you? I know you have done a little bit of work in Canada, I think, with some of our Indigenous communities. So I know you can come to Canada. So those schools that are looking, bring these guys, or other places. So please let people know where they can find you.
I mean, you can find us on our website, hlfinc.org. Subscribe to our newsletter. It'll let you know where we are around the nation. We actually are expanding our Mindful Moment program into 3 new cities, 4 new schools, 2 in Milwaukee, 1 in Chicago, and 1 in Denver. So that's really exciting. Like you said, we have our satellite program in the Akwesasne territory in the Mohawk Reservation, where we're working in upstate New York and in Canada and the surrounding counties. Also, we take a deeper dive into esoteric practices in our for-profit organization called the Involution Group. So you can check us out there at involution.love. We have this really great 30-day course called Spiritual Strategic Planning, the 8 Paths to Happiness. And, check our book out, Let Your Light Shine. And, just follow us. We're on Insight Timer also as the Involution Group if you want to get some audio practices from us. And yeah, that's about it. And, just if you want to get us out to your city, just reach out to us and, we can figure out what that looks like.
Wow. Thank you so much for taking the time out to have such an amazing conversation with me. I'm so, so grateful that you're able to come on because I am appreciative of your time. Thank you for joining us to another episode of the Love and Compassion Podcast with Giselle, and join us soon. Bye.
Peace, love.
Thank you.